Rosselló. On behalf of our Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration, I'm the director, Carlos Mercader. I want to say thank you. Bienvenidos todos y que se sientan esa palma, Eric. So we want to start our event first saying thank you to all of the elected officials that are here today with us, all of the veterans, the Marine Engineers that are here with us. Thank you for your sacrifice. And we want to say thank you to the governor of the great state of Florida, Governor Rick Scott, who's here with us. I want to recognize and say thank you for the Senator of Florida, Mr. Bill Nelson. I want to recognize our Congressman, Darren Soto. And the mayor of Kissimmee, Jose Alvarez. And we want to say thank you to all of our community for being here. So a big clap for you. Fuerte aplauso. So today, our governor, the governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló, he's here and he's going to come here and he's going to be talking to you, having a conversation with you, with our community. Who are so important for the future of Puerto Rico. Before that, we're going to hear from our senator, someone who has been supportive of Puerto Rico, someone who's been there whenever we need someone out of the Senate, we need support out of the Senate. Senator Bill Nelson, he's always there for us. So now we're going to hear from him.
Muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de hablar con ustedes. Buenos días. Yo voy a explicar los problemas en la isla. Congressman Soto and I went many times, but the last time just a couple of weeks ago. Somebody's music is playing up here. Let's see if I can turn it off. Sounds real good. La música de la fiesta. He can't get it turned off. When Darren and I went to the island just a couple of weeks ago, we went to a hospital. The top 2 floors of the hospital are not habitable because of the mold and mildew. The roof is still leaking. The lower floors, where they had jury-rigged a number of things to try to keep patients, cranked up the AC as high as it would go to try to suppress the mold and mildew. And that was just the first glimpse. So Darren and I went into the outskirts of San Juan. We wanted to get into the communities. And of course, what we found was no electricity. The one place in the community, as we talked with the mayor and the residents on the street, the one place with electricity was La Tienda, because they had a generator. Now, 4 months after a hurricane, can you imagine Floridians living under these conditions where still large parts of the island do not have potable water, and where it has been so difficult to get the sufficient potable and clean water into places like the dialysis centers. Right after the hurricane, I flew up to Utuado in the governor's helicopter. Utuado was cut off for 2.5 weeks. And it's amazing the resilience of the people. Since the flood had washed out the bridge, they had erected a cable across the river and were using a grocery cart basket as a pulley to pull back and forth supplies and medical supplies. So we've got a long way to go. And while we are helping the island to recover, we also need to make sure that we're taking care of the thousands and thousands of Puerto Ricans that have come here. Darren and I have had several town halls across the state, met with dozens of community leaders. We've spoken with countless families who have all come to Florida since the storm, and they all want one thing. Eventually, they'd like to go home. And certainly that's an interest of the governor to have them back home because, for example, of the 12,000 doctors in Puerto Rico, there are only 9,000 left. And he needs the people and the expertise back on the island. And so our priority ought to be to try to restore the island to conditions so that Puerto Rico can replenish and refurbish. We need to do everything that we can for those who were forced to come here to have adequate housing and all kinds of preparations, because they are just like anybody else. They think America is home, and we should be doing everything that we can to help them. And so that's why Darren and I have called on the Department of Labor to extend the disaster unemployment assistance for Puerto Ricans. It's about to cut off. We want it extended. We've demanded the Housing and Urban Development Department and FEMA work together to develop long-term housing strategy for displaced people and to work with the congressional delegation to ensure the funding of all of these affected folks. Now, not only has everything been slow at the switch, the Congress has refused to provide the funding and resources needed to help the people of Puerto Rico recover. As a matter of fact, they've passed legislation that makes it worse. Now, let me give you a couple examples. In 2016, the task force on the future of Puerto Rico was set up. Senator Rubio and I were both members of that task force. And we came out with a number of items that were to find ways that the Congress could help Puerto Rico. And at the end of 2016, we, the task force, chaired by Orrin Hatch, issued a list of recommendations that indeed the Congress could help. And things like the child tax credit, things like the earned income tax credit, making economic growth on the island a priority. And what did Congress do? The exact opposite. They didn't take a single one of our bipartisan recommendations. In fact, in the tax bill, they raised the tax credit, child tax credit, for mainlanders, but not for Puerto Ricans. On top of that, the bill made things worse for companies operating in Puerto Rico, manufacturing, where Darren and I visited a manufacturing plant on excellent, exquisite medical equipment. And they complicated the tax code in Puerto Rico into a very rigorous kind of tax schedule. Well, I want to close with this. No American should have to go through what the people of Puerto Rico are still going through right now. In fact, no human being should have to go through what they're going through. And as Governor Rosselló will tell you, that the fight isn't over yet. And that's because the island was already seeing a drastic shortage of professionals that I mentioned, the physicians. I said 12,000. It was something more like 15,000, and it's down to 9,000 now. And these issues are only going to get worse if we don't fix the Medicaid funding cliff. Medicaid is about to cut off in Puerto Rico, and that's because Medicaid is not on a formula like the other states. And so the critical point right now is the disaster bill. And what the Democratic leader, Senator Schumer, is trying to get in the disaster bill is cost sharing, so Puerto Rico doesn't have to pay the 10% to activate